Hey everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And our guest today is Jason Jones. He's executive in residence at Rackspace Technology, and Michael Fredericks, global Apex and multi-cloud healthcare lead at Dell Technology. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah, excited for this discussion. We kind of started the discussion at HIMSS earlier this year, and this continuation of that discussion, and maybe dive a little deeper on a few areas. But before we go there, Jason, why don't you start off? Tell us a little bit about yourself and Rackspace.
Yeah, absolutely. So I been at Rackspace since April of last year, right? So going on my 18-month anniversary here. Um, the exciting thing at Rackspace, so we are a true hybrid multi-cloud managed service provider, right? With an anchor around managing Epic. Epic's terminology is infrastructure managed service. Us in IT would think about platform as a service kind of capability.
Awesome. Great to have you here, Jason. Michael, how about yourself and Dell Technologies?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Great to be here today. Well, I've been working in healthcare IT for about 20 years now and other parts of IT longer than that. And, healthcare is a special place for me. I have certainly a spouse who works in the healthcare field, and, we're all patients at the end of the day, right? So it's great to be part of supporting this type of uh, business. And, at Dell, I mean, we've got a little bias maybe, but I feel like the end-to-end portfolio of some of the best technology that's in use in healthcare. And we just love being able to chat with our customers and figure out, okay, what is it that they're trying to solve, and how do we mix and match the right technologies and partners to help you get there? So glad
Yeah,
to be here.
absolutely. Well, Michael, let's talk about kind of that future of where you all are headed and what you see happening. How do you see IT infrastructure playing out, 5 years from now for an organization, maybe one that embraces multi-cloud and maybe those that don't, or other trends you see in the IT infrastructure space?
Yeah, sure. Good question. So multi-cloud, right, is a buzzword. I mean, you put it up there with AI. I mean, really, it's a reality at the end of the day. And we don't choose to become multi-cloud because it's cool. We do it because hopefully it's achieving some sort of an outcome for our organization. And I think as long as we keep that outcome top of mind and go into the conversation with trusted partners, that how we get there, there's a lot of ways to get there. And sometimes it's not always the way that we think of at first. So multi-cloud, I think, is going to continue to be present. And again, what is that? The definition tends to be using one or more public cloud providers to host services for your organization. So in that light, as I mentioned at HIMSS, we find that most healthcare organizations are already multi-cloud to some level. They've got some bits and pieces running in multiple places. And I think that how that is going to change over the years to come really just depends on, what is it that the organization is prioritizing? What are the success metrics of transformation for them? Because oftentimes it's going to be a mix of technology, it's going to be a mix of locations. And at the end of the day, cloud's an operating model, not necessarily a place. So how do we just help them get there with whatever it is that they need to solve the outcome? So I think that some organizations will choose, if we look at traditional sense of cloud with being somewhere outside of my data center, I think 5 years from now is not going to be drastically different than it is today. We're going to have some organizations that have decided they've got a comfort level around keeping that stuff close and manageable by a small team. And you're going to have organizations that are doing everything in public cloud or almost everything, and then there's going to be somewhere in between.
And I think it's interesting to think about, like, as you said, you don't just do multi-cloud for fun, right? Like, hopefully there's a reason that you do it. And, if you look at the ransomware incidents, if you look at the, even the update incident we saw recently that took down so much of IT, feels like multi-cloud is almost essential, to avoid some of, to be able to have some redundancy in healthcare. What would you add, Jason, as far as, your view in multi-cloud and embracing that, or even, other trends in IT infrastructure?
Yeah, we here at Rackspace are seeing a velocity of change, right? And cloud has become a buzzword, like kind of like Michael said, right? And everybody running to the cloud. We have the unique opportunity at Rackspace where we have a phenomenal relationship with the public cloud providers. We also are one of the largest single, private cloud providers in the world, and that enables us to really see a very unique landscape of organizations. We've had certain organizations run to the cloud and then recognize from a cost advantage perspective and from another, the public cloud aspect, and then recognize, wow, that's not the economies we were looking for, wrong place, wrong time, and then repatriate some of those workloads back into the private cloud. So when you think about 5 years from now, we're having tremendous amounts of conversation right now around data center consolidation, cloud assessment, what belongs where for what reason and how. And the reality is, you're never going to truly completely eliminate your on-premise data center. You will have some things there, right? There just needs to be capability at that edge. But as we look at, whether it's, sitting here today from Dubai, whether it, is some sovereign data, some level of capability that needs to be in country, be it the UK, be it the US. How do we leverage that capability? We make sure that that private data is actually private, and whether it's expats from another country, bad actors, whatever it is, don't necessarily have access to that data in the public cloud or capability in that public cloud. But then again, we might want to buy some data services or some data capability from the public cloud providers that apply to that data, right? So I think as we look at that hybrid multi-cloud, that's where you get that on-prem, that public, and that private capability that organizations just can't get away from. And then to your point, John, security and ransomware, how do we defend against it, right? If man built it, man can break it. We're always going to be in that world of ransomware and bad actors seeing a way in for money. But how do we mitigate that, right? How do we lessen some of that impact and be able to deliver care at the end of the day, what the business demands, patients in beds and capability and understanding, am I going to have a bad reaction to a medication and all of those challenges that we have at the bedside, right? So yeah, I think that we're going to see just this continued velocity to exit the data center, but we have to do it in an intelligent manner to truly understand what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Interesting. You make some interesting points internationally that that obviously adds some different complications and challenges as well. But when you talk about on-prem versus the cloud, forever the EHR was on-prem. No
Yes.
one wanted to go off-site. They're like, no, it needs to be close. And many of the EHR vendors said, no, you have to do it on site. But we've seen an evolution. So talk to us, Jason. Maybe you could start. Can we really run EHR systems now on multi-cloud? And what are you seeing in that regard?
Yeah, so you just said something that actually scares me to death. Running an EHR in a multi-cloud environment, right? So to me, that implies one aspect of my three-tiered application in a public cloud or in multiple public clouds, and then another tier in a private cloud. That makes me extremely nervous, right? Just simply because if you have a failure or you have some disaster that moves that workload to a different location, we've introduced additional layers of latency, complexity, and truly, how do we manage that, right? So can we run EHR in a multi-cloud environment? Technically, sure, right? But logically, should we? Probably not, just for safety and capability and delivery. So at Rackspace, we really focus on that EHR, and not only that EHR, but that ecosystem of applications with those low latency, high throughput, everything tied to the interface engine that needs that connectivity in the private cloud. Then there's the ancillary workloads, and maybe it's some back office stuff, maybe it's some tier zero stuff, Active Directory, some things like that, that can sit out in that outer layer capability. So technically, yes, we could do multi-cloud. Would I, as an organization? I absolutely hope nobody is doing that or nobody plans to do that today.
Interesting. And do you hear, I mean, it's interesting that many people think, and obviously not IT infrastructure people, that, oh, it's the EHR, it's one server, it's all
Right.
stored there, and it's all good. Like, it's not, right? I mean, as you said, every EHR, has a large system of applications to be able to connect. So that's why it needs to be on the same cloud. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. And we like that private cloud. Again, PHI, right? Protecting that PHI, keeping control of it, knowing where it's at, understanding where it's moving, if it does move, and who has access to it, right? So I can guarantee, we have sovereign services in the NHS in the UK, for instance, right? As a US passport holder, I can't even walk on our data center floor, right? So that really keeps that sovereignty of data within inside the sovereign UK. Right. So when you think about that PHI and that, can I guarantee who has access on the public cloud if you're an administrator? We've seen bits get flipped and crazy things happen. So I don't know if you actually can 100% guarantee just the nature of true public cloud and what it offers, that level of restriction, right? I think it's very, very difficult.
Yeah. Michael, what would you add to this? And let's also talk about kind of this shift to the cloud for EMR systems, even if it's a private cloud or other implementation. What do you see happening there?
Yeah, as Jason started to talk, I kind of had it in my head of just because you can do something doesn't mean you should, right? And I think that's kind of where he got to in his conversation, right? So if you look at multi-cloud, if you take certain organizations and you talk about what's going to be your control plane, what's going to be your abstraction layer for those workloads, can you get to a model where multi-cloud is this seamless, transparent situation of where applications are fault tolerant across all of these different locations of public cloud providers? Sure. There's going to be certain types of businesses that can get there with certain types of automation and the staff on board for that. But if we look towards healthcare and providers in particular, that's not the typical workloads that we see in healthcare, and so that it comes back to ruthless standardization and for the sake of trying to make environments more stable and more efficient. And when if you're going to go multi-cloud, you don't do it because you can. You do it because it's providing some level of value. And I would argue that in that situation, it's probably not going to provide the value. And I think you also have to kind of work SaaS workloads in here as well. And a lot of organizations we talk to say that they're kind of SaaS first now. It used to be cloud first, and now they're SaaS first. And I think for most of the EMRs that we deal with in the larger systems, you could argue whether they're available on a SaaS model or not. But I think that as you look at SaaS, you got to start to realize again that we're kind of adding way more silos, I think, than we anticipated. You kind of think of, if I've got two public clouds doing their own thing, we've kind of got some silos of workload there. I've still got some control and some visibility into those workloads, but SaaS becomes almost this black box. And I think that as you pointed out to earlier, John, we talked about some of the public cloud workloads and SaaS and so forth. And there was this idea early on that as I went public cloud or as I went SaaS, that I just, got so much better in my posture around outages and security things. And what have we seen really lately, right? If you went to try to have your car repaired not that long ago, you saw that the SaaS-based offering that was powering that was impacting thousands of dealers across the US. And I think we've seen that, nobody's immune, and SaaS doesn't change the equation. So it comes back to having this kind of thoughtful, pragmatic approach around how do I protect and standardize my core applications. And I can tap into public cloud for value-added services for innovation, but I don't want to have to move that data to the public cloud to take advantage of those services. I want those services to come to me. And that's where this conversation with Rackspace, really makes a good sense about being that central point for these critical applications and the data.
Well, let's dive into that. I think many people may be wondering, wait, how do Rackspace and Dell work together? I know you have the Dell Alliance's healthcare cloud that's built on Rackspace. Michael, maybe tell us a little bit about the benefits of that solution, with Rackspace and Dell coming together.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dell has a cloud service provider program. We've got hundreds of fantastic partners in that program across all industries, across all geographies. But as we talk about healthcare, we talk about specific workloads within healthcare, right? We can double click very quickly into which of our Dell cloud service providers have the required experience and expertise to run those workloads. And as Jason mentioned, he mentioned Epic in his talk. And when we're talking with customers about healthcare outcomes, when those healthcare outcomes include Epic or some of the other things that Rackspace is really capable of delivering on, we talk about that as Dell Alliance's Healthcare Cloud. And what that is how do we double click on those cloud service providers to find the right one for a specific healthcare outcome? And at the end of the day, what our customers get is they get the very best technology powering that, and not only just the technology, but the expertise within the healthcare organization inside of Dell to make sure that we're validating those infrastructures, we're testing, we're working with the ISVs, we know how to size and design those solutions, we know how to protect those workloads. And then look at Rackspace and how do we operationalize that? How do we take the very best solutions that are well architected and operationalize those and raise the bar and the level of services that we can provide? That's what we partner with Rackspace on, and I'm sure Jason has his take on some additional points on that.
Yeah, Jason, I'd love to hear, as he pointed out, Epic is a big system. It's a big implementation that they rely on for their livelihood. Let's be frank.
Right.
They live on the Epic, and they're not going to just throw it to some random hosting provider that says they host Epic. So talk to us about, what you bring to the table as Rackspace and the partnership with Dell.
Yeah. So what's exciting about Rackspace specifically is we've been a hosting provider for 30 years, right? So when you think about just the average healthcare data center, there's a number of workloads that have already been sitting in essentially a Rackspace type environment. They might be on your on-premise, but in our environment where we host, we've been doing that for 30 years. Database as a service. We wrote OpenStack for NASA. We run the second largest private VMware cloud in the world, right? So that level of capability that we deliver has been there for a long time. And recently, as of a couple of years ago, prior to my joining, we made the decision to really double down and focus heavily on the healthcare vertical, right? So today, we're the largest third-party hosting provider for Epic, right? So outside of Epic themselves, there's nobody bigger than what we're doing, right? So when you think about concurrent connection count, we're hosting about 75,000 concurrent connections of Epic environments across the US.
Wow.
That's pretty staggering when you think about it in general. Then you start to go out, like we talked about, that ring of workloads, that what are those things that interface into that? We're hosting those as well for our clients. Those next layer out, right, as those ancillary workloads that you still need to deliver care, but they might not be really, really closely integrated to Epic. We're hosting those for clients as well. And then you go further out and you have just those, systems that are, sure, they're one VM or this or that. Those systems we're migrating for our clients into the public cloud capability, right? So we're evaluating what is core to your business delivery and what is core to your second layer business delivery. And then what is, essential, but not necessarily needs that high latency throughput. And then as we continue to talk about it, disaster recovery is one thing. We've talked about disaster recovery, ransomware, but really the true key here is business continuity. How do I continue to deliver care without impacting my clinicians or my providers inside my organization? Cyber resiliency and all of those types of capability. That's really what we're doing today for those clients that we're the largest third-party Epic hosting provider. So to your point, John, a lot of our clients are super excited. They want to talk about it. Dr. Chaudhry out of Seattle Children's, I mean, he will have a phone call from anybody he is beside himself on what service capability. Even he's spoken publicly about this last incident that we've just spoken about, an update affecting an entire globe of infrastructure. how he was not impacted because of business continuity strategies that have been put in place for his organization. So all of that built on Dell Technologies, right? So they have the best technology, in our opinion, in the market to deliver that level of capability of 5 nines of availability that we can guarantee and stand behind with an SLA.
Yeah.
Couldn't do that with just any provider of run of the mill.
Yeah, we'll have to have you and Dr. Chaudhry on a future episode talk about some of those details. That would be a lot of fun.
That'd be
You know,
awesome.
we haven't talked about AI, and it's you can't do an IT podcast without talking about some AI. I think maybe you could start, Jason. It's exploding in healthcare.
Yes.
How do you see kind of the cloud or not using the cloud? Whether it's multi-cloud or not, impacting a healthcare organization's AI efforts. And I know Rackspace has some very specific AI efforts as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So three parts of our business organization, right? We talked about public cloud. We talked about private cloud. Well, the third part is FAIR, right? It's Foundry for AI from Rackspace. And so that is a public and private capability that we deliver AI to an organization, depending on what the need is, right? And we really work our clients through the format of ideate, right? Let's talk about what that is. What problems are you trying to solve? We're technologists, and we do have some canned delivery and capability that we've done for healthcare, but really, what problems are you trying to solve? So let's ideate about that. And then in an incubation scenario, let's work through that in a fail fast model, right? With all of the key stakeholders and how the data that they need and how they're consuming it. And then once we get to a place where we could stamp it out, we move into industrialization, right? So we stamp that out, we deliver that level of capability, whether it's generative, whatever level of AI capability is needed for that scenario. And then we come back to the beginning and we continue to ideate. So we really bring the client through the journey of things that they're trying to solve for. Just because you're a health system doesn't mean you have to solve for the exact same problems, right? You might be a children's hospital, you might be a research organization, you might just be, a safety net organization, and all of them are sure delivering care, but in region or in a healthcare desert type scenario, they're all trying to solve for different things. We don't claim to understand and know that, but we bring the tools and the capability from a private, whether it's genomics research and really intense patient data in the life sciences capability, or it's public, right? Where we're trying to do a generative call center type capability. One of the things that we've delivered is a generative AI kind of suicide help desk hotline where you can get some of that feedback type functionality, right? Where the person can walk through scenarios themselves and they're not going to deliver care, but they're going to get to the right solution faster than just trying to call somebody and, a general hotline and be passed through, a tiered level of support. The generative becomes that tiered level of support capability and gets to the solution quicker, right? So
Interesting.
ideate, incubate, and industrialize.
Yeah, I love that. Michael, what would you add as far as AI? I haven't heard anyone predict that we're going to need less data storage and less CPUs, right? Like it's kind of funny, right, to think about, but no one said more. All they say is more, 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 right?
Yeah.
I don't know. The
Yeah.
market in the last couple of days has sure said less, 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 but that's a different story.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's interesting. We'll see that, is the market a predictor of the future of AI? I don't
No,
think so.
no.
I think, AI, first and foremost, has been transformational so far in healthcare, and it will continue to be so in ways that frankly, I just don't think that we can predict. So there's lots of different types of AI, whether you're looking at generative or other types of AI. And I think it comes back to, again, what we don't do it because it's cool. We do it because it's solving a problem. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve? And then, what's the best way to get there? I would say we need to be cautious that we don't let the quest for AI derail us from what we're doing to properly run our organization. So whether you call it multi-cloud by design or just plain old good business practices, we need to make sure that AI today and whatever the next trend is, that it's not derailing our thoughtful approach to how we run our organization. So whether that's in an on-premise environment, whether that's in public cloud, whether that's in this Rackspace, private cloud environment, I think you need to make sure that you're using the right set of standardized tools so that we get there in the right way possible, and also protect the flexibility that you have, going forward. And because what is AI about, really? I mean, AI is about data. It's about doing things with data. So if we're not careful, this quest for AI is significantly compounds the problem that we had with just trying to move our VM workload somewhere else, because now we're having to shift massive amounts of data all over the place to take advantage of this cool AI thing and this cool AI thing. And we want to work in that model instead, where we're bringing workloads to our data. And in some cases, there's going to be some hybrid approach. If you've got organizations that have a short-term need for this massive compute power to do some fine-tuning or training on a model, the public cloud may be the very best place for that. It's short-term. I can turn it on, I can get it done, I can turn it off. But after that model's trained, we find that it's much more economical, up to 75% more economical, to continually run those AI workloads in either a private cloud type environment with Rackspace or in your data center.
That's interesting. I don't think we've thought about what, the lock-in of our data for a Gen AI model being stored in a certain place yet. It's so new. We haven't had to move. We haven't needed to move yet. So, wow, that's a fascinating look forward. What else would you add? Maybe we'll start with you, Jason, and Michael, as we kind of wrap up. If you were talking to a CIO, director of IT infrastructure, as they look forward, there's a plethora of options available now, which is great, but also a challenge. So what advice would you give them to make sure that they're prepared for the next 5 to 10 years and when it comes to infrastructure?
Yeah, we really lean into the assessments, right? Right workload, right place, right location for the right reason, right? It really, really comes down to that. And we've been talking a lot about data. That's what this is all about, right? It's the leverage of clinicians and providers at the bedside to have better data to make better clinical decisions. So how do you get to that, right? So really always keep a lack of better terms, the end in mind, right? What is the goal of what I'm trying to do? Not because it's a shiny light or, squirrel and run to that, but really at the end of the day, we're trying to provide better care. Somebody mentioned it earlier, and we were chatting. We're all patients at the end of the day, right? At some point, it's somebody's mom, somebody's sister, somebody's daughter, right? Sitting in that bed. And at the end of the day, we want to provide capability to provide better decision support. And however we can do that, I'm all in for doing it, right? And so let's keep that in mind, as let's plan from that all the way down through the infrastructure, right? So the business objectives at the very, very top, and then plan all the way down through to the actual bare metal infrastructure, and then we build from there, right? And you have to think through that entire ecosystem of what that means, which is way more complex than when I started. Not even going to name how many number of years ago, right? With pre-VMware was a very, very different world in the AS400s and whatnot that we had. But also look at the advancements that we've made in medicine, and look at the opportunity that we have just on the horizon to continue that decision support, albeit without bias, right? We have to keep that on top of mind as well, is because bias creeps its way into all of these things that we're talking about. So plan from the business objectives all the way through the infrastructure, and then build that infrastructure from the ground up, right? But do a very in-depth assessment to understand what you have. I would argue we never really understood when I was working in the data center what we had, knowing the complexity and advancements that we've made in the few decades since I've been out of the data center, that I would argue that most people don't truly understand what they have. So how can you make true business objective decisions without that clear understanding to set you up for success in the next 3, 5, 7 years? Because it's a dynamic world that's going to continue to change.
Definitely. Michael, what would you add? What would you give us for advice for a CIO infrastructure expert?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of what Jason said, but I would, I guess, just say at the high level, just challenge your default line of thinking when you're approaching these solutions. What is the outcome? What's my what's my the thing that I'm going to jump to first? Kind of what am I thinking it is? And then, maybe just challenge it a little bit. Who are your trusted partners? Who can you work vet this against? Can you challenge them to come up with an approach that protects, your interests, now and in the future? And I would say almost go into these solutions with an exit plan in mind, and not because the solutions are going to fail, but because, just as Jason said, we don't know what 3 years from now holds. We don't know what 5 years from now holds. Market dynamics are continually changing, and I think that if you're going in with an exit plan in mind, it's going to force you to start doing a lot of standardization and minimizing complexity in the environment. And once you do that, you're not only helping on the bottom line financially wise, but you're also preparing yourselves to make those much more efficient to operate. And should you need to move those workloads in the future, you've kind of already had that thought. And be cautious as you're going higher and higher up the stack in some of these services and SaaS-based offerings, because the higher up the stack you go, the more challenging it can be to get out. So it's not saying that those solutions don't have a place, but just keep that in mind. And then I think at the end of the day, once you do all that, you'll come out with a really good outcome.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. Questioning your assumptions is great advice to see if your assumptions are wrong. Right? The amount of innovation and development that's happening right now in these spaces is incredible. So it's definitely great advice to question our assumptions. Jason, Michael, this was a lot of fun. Great being able to talk to you about the future of cloud and multi-cloud and hosting Epic in the cloud, et cetera. A lot of great topics for the readers and listeners here at Healthcare IT Today. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcasting application. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, John.
Thanks,
Always a
Jonathan.
pleasure.